Welcome back to our CKLA lessons. Today we're on Domain 1, Lesson 7, Point of View, Part 1. So our objectives for today, we're going to compare and contrast the author's different points of view at different ages, and we're also going to describe events from specific points of view and complete drafting our name narratives. Some key vocabulary for today: customized, built according to individual requirements; realization, a clear understanding; persevered, persistent in the face of obstacles; spunk, spirit, liveliness; and enhanced, improved. So, review from yesterday. What we've done so far is we read about Jennifer Liu, who is a Chinese American who has a lot of issues with how her name has been created, and also the meaning behind it. So far in our narrative, the author's perception of how her parents chose her name and why she was given no middle name. And it's also her feelings about being an outsider because she is not white. So part of the fun of reading a personal narrative is actually to feel what their personal feelings are about a topic. So that is actually the author's point of view. We got to see, for us, Jennifer Liu might not be very different and we wouldn't really think too much of it, but seeing how she sees it and her perception is what makes personal narratives really fun, because you get to see someone else's point of view. So we have 2 pages we're gonna read from the text, and then we're gonna answer a few questions after that. Wan means gentle, gracious. Wan is traditionally written with the female root, but Mom took it out and swapped in the jade root. Yu is an antiquated version of the character for jade. I guess that makes my Chinese name the land of gentle jade. Pretty lame compared to the joy of the world. Joy to the world, if you ask me. So this is how I ended up with 2 names, a simple English name and a customized Chinese one. Actually, if you count my nicknames, I have at least 15 names. They range from obvious abbreviations like J. Lu to more story-oriented ones like Gimpy, Potty Lu, and Evil. Then there are the nicknames that reflect my stage in life. 5 years ago, in the midst of a post-breakup and mid-career crisis, I came to a realization. There was no point in trying to be something I wasn't, white, or something others wanted me to be, the fair one. I started making mass changes in my life, challenging old traditional beliefs from my past, particularly the negative, self-destructive ones, and exploring new and healthier trains of thought. When you clean house and tear down the Great Wall, it's easy to second-guess what you're doing. But I persevered, and through it, I gained a greater sense of confidence. I started feeling free to be myself, enough so that the spunk and spark returned to my life. Enough so that a good friend started calling me Jen 2.0. I would spit out a sassy, witty comment, and he would hiss, "Watch out, it's Jen 2.0. I had become a newer, speedier, more enhanced version of old me, and I began to love my names for what they are, for what they aren't, and for the betweenness that they captured, because I finally learned to love the uniqueness that is me. So if you're ever in the market for a name, drop me a line. My family knows a good astrologer. Now, the bottom part isn't part of it. That's kind of like a biography of who the author is. Jennifer Liu grew up in Windsor, Connecticut in the 1970s. Liu is a writer in San Francisco whose work focuses on her life as a Chinese American. She has founded a group of humored storytelling, works for a digital publisher, and serves on the board of Youth Speaks, an organization dedicated to supporting young poets and writers. She spends her downtime volunteering at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. So now we're going to have a few questions about the text. So at the start of 7th grade, what was Jennifer's point of view about Chinese? Well, when she felt she was Chinese, she said that was an outsider thing. She even said, I gave myself the name Elizabeth because it was more white and I felt like I would fit in more. So the quote that I was able to pull from that: "And my God, I wanted to be white because in Windsor, Connecticut, where less than 1% of the population was Chinese, white to me meant belonging." So that's kind of you can see how her point of view was at the beginning. How did Jennifer's point of view about being Chinese connect her to her point of view about not having a middle name? Well, at first she kind of felt like a middle, like she stood out, so she created her own Elizabeth. And she felt that was her way of feeling connected to her American culture. I took matters into my own hands. When I started 7th grade at Sage Park Middle School, I enrolled as Jennifer Elizabeth Lou. I picked Elizabeth because it was the whitest name I could think of. What was Jennifer's point of view about not having a middle name in 9th grade? Well, she liked Naya. Eventually, she got rid of it, and she actually started to like it because she thought, it made her different and unique. Made her stand out a little bit more. How do the words two separate entities and betweenness show two different points of view? Well, when she's talking about these separate entities, when we think of separate entities, we think of completely two different things that are not at all connected. So for her, in 9th grade, she saw that her Chinese name and her English name were two completely separate things. They had no connection to each other. But when it goes into the next passage, when she talks about her betweenness, it is actually this kind of gray area that's between them. It's not this big separate thing. It's actually they're kind of connected to each other. So she actually sees it as a unique quality to herself that makes her different and unique. So separate entities and betweenness are two different things to show point of view. So what we're going to do next is we're going to continue with our personal narratives. But we're also going to talk about it in point of view. So what I have here is an example of a time that I went on a field trip to the zoo. And what's really cool about it is after I read it, we're going to kind of talk a little bit about why it makes it my point of view. Last year I went to the zoo for a field trip. While there, I really wanted to see the tiger. My favorite animal is a cheetah, but my zoo doesn't have one, so I settled for my next favorite. When we arrived at the exhibit, the tiger was nowhere to be found. I started to get really disappointed. It wasn't until a friend of mine pointed to the tiger approaching behind the brush and trees. Eventually, the tiger made their way up to the glass and fell asleep. I couldn't wait to take a picture next to it. I was so happy to finally get to see one of my favorite exhibits at the zoo. Now, this is an example of a point of view narrative. That is my own personal experience at the zoo. What makes it a point of view is I can guarantee that many of you have a different favorite exhibit at the zoo, or maybe you haven't been there, or maybe you had a different favorite animal. Could be a different experience. Maybe the tiger never showed up for you. It's all about our own personal experience and our own point of view about it. So that kind of is what makes it, that's my own feelings and opinions about the tiger and how I felt at the zoo, but everyone has their own opinions. That's why this makes it a point of view narrative. So now it's going to be up to you to do your next activity. Yesterday you started writing your name narrative, so today you're going to continue doing that and you're going to complete the narrative. You're going to complete it on a separate paper or in other format that you're going to do, and you're going to send it to your teacher. If you wish, you can write it to respond to one of the prompts below. You may also write your own topic or continue the topic you wrote yesterday. So you have three options. You can either write, you can continue writing your narrative from yesterday, you can come up with a different topic, or you can use one of the prompts below. So the prompts we have for today: if you could change your name for a week, what would you change it to and why? Write to convince your friends to call you by this new name. 2, who named you and how was your name chosen? And 3, if you were named after someone, write about your connection to that person. So that is your assessment for today's lesson. So make sure you complete that and send that to your teacher. And that is it for this lesson, and I will see you guys at the next video.